Okay. Well, I certainly appreciate your patience and making it out in the weather this morning. Welcome on behalf of Peloton to the first installment in our 2013 seminar series, which is called Where the Leaders Are Headed. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Randy Hake, and I'm actually the president of the Peloton Holding Company. The topic that we are going to be talking about this morning is very, very substantial, and very, very substantial in many ways, but I did want to just hold up the actual act, which is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, 2 volumes, comprised of over 2,000 pages, and I looked at this earlier, really small print for 2,000 pages. What's interesting about this is, as it's come to be known as the Affordable Care Act, this is going to be the broadest sweeping reform that we as American business folks have probably seen since Medicare or Social Security. The impacts that it's going to have on our business, and I would say to you that every employer in this room and every employer in the abyss is going to be impacted in some way by the Affordable Care Act. What we will be talking about today are primarily the financial impacts of doing so. So the way we have it set up this morning is we have 3 speakers. The first speaker is Mr. Steve Erkenbrack. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Rocky Mountain Health Plans. Then he will be followed by Ken Thomas, who is the President of Peloton Benefits, and then I will follow Ken for a few minutes. So when you think of everything that's gone on to get this Affordable Care Act to this point, there were certainly obstacles last year, the Supreme Court decision, and then of course the election. We will do our very best up here this morning to not blend politics into the presentation and discussion. I will also tell you that please don't misconstrue this presentation as legal or tax advice. So my attorneys in the room should be happy now. Okay. When you think of this, though, we will be taking a very pro-employer view of how ACA is going to have financial impact on your organizations. So just by show of hands this morning, of the companies represented, how many of the companies have fewer than 50 employees? Okay, so the most. How many have over 50 employees? Okay, so it's split about half and half. We'll be respectful of that this morning, talking on both sides of that equation. The thing that you're going to hear this morning that is different and apart, I don't know about you, but I've been inundated with information and seminars and all the kinds of overkill, if you will, that is going on with Affordable Care Act. Today we're going to raise awareness, but beyond that, we're going to talk about actual solutions that you as small to mid-sized business owners and executives will have the opportunity to implement and provide a little bit more of a safe harbor from some of the things that may take place financially. Okay, so having said that, I would like to be able to introduce our first speaker this morning. Steve Erkenbrack is, again, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Rocky Mountain Health Plans. Prior to that, he was with Rocky Mountain as the VP of Legal and Government Affairs, and Steve's career is a very extensive legal background. He's been a trial attorney. He served 6 years as the Mesa County elected district attorney and 4 years as the state of Colorado's chief deputy attorney general. So when I think about this, Steve is one of the members of the board of the Colorado Health Care Exchange as well. So I'm certainly thinking that his approach, his perspective is something you're going to be very, very interested in learning about this morning. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Steve Erkenbrack.
You know, I have not yet figured out how I can get myself introduced without getting myself outed as a lawyer. Having spent, and worse than that, as a trial lawyer. So normally business representatives, business employers, when they hear that, start to leave. I appreciate your sticking around. It's probably due to the weather and the traffic of getting, it took you so long to get in here, you know, give me a couple of minutes. But actually, I'd like to talk a little bit about my background because one of the things that I learned as a trial lawyer is, and it's common sense, you need to know something about a person's background in order to weigh and view his comments and his opinions. For example, if you ask an opinion on what has been called the Affordable Care Act, if you ask Mitt Romney what he thinks of it, or Rush Limbaugh, you may get a different cut than if you ask Nancy Pelosi or Barack Obama. And so, a word about my background. I am a recovering lawyer, and I am the president of a health plan. I was giving a talk at Harvard about a year ago, and I got that far, and some guy clearly was just bothered by that, and I said, "You doing okay?" Because it looked like he was getting sick, and he said, "You're a trial lawyer and a health insurance company guy? What else could go wrong?" And I said, "Well, I'm a Republican." And he said, "It's the trifecta of evil." I've embraced that. So, and I'm actually even in a smaller subset than that, because I am a recovering trial lawyer, runs a health plan. I am a Republican, and I'm one of the Republicans who actually believes in healthcare reform. So, my job here is sort of get us grounded for the next two speakers to sort of go into some more detail. So let's talk about this law and the financial implications of it. As referenced, this law has been a bit controversial. You know that an issue is controversial in this country when the people can't agree on the name. Think about that. I would submit, one of the most, if not the most, controversial issues in the United States for the last 25 years is abortion. And the advocates and proponents on both sides don't even have a common vocabulary. Right? You are pro-life or you are pro-choice. And the same is true when you think about that, the really visceral issues. And so when you wind up with the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act being called either the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, that's a clue that there's a little bit of consternation going on here. Now, this has been finessed somewhat in the debates when Barack Obama said, "I kind of like the name Obamacare," throwing the political party on the other side into consternation of, what do we call it now? We can't insult him if he's wearing it as a compliment. So we'll use all the terms interchangeably. One other word about me. I will probably say things that will offend every single one of you. Not my goal. I offend enough people without having that as a goal. But the fact is, this situation that we as a culture have found ourselves in is such that we sort of stumbled and bumbled our way here. I came to healthcare after 22 years in a courtroom, and I came here because now, by the way, I was not one of those trial lawyers. You never saw me on late night TV, right? Didn't do personal injury, didn't do divorce. I was a business litigator, and I did criminal prosecutions, kind of a weird background. And I came to healthcare because when I was in business litigation, Rocky Mountain, then Rocky Mountain HMO, came to me and said, "We have a dispute with the state of Colorado." And they hired me to represent them in this dispute. And it winding up as a trial, and hope you have not had to go through litigation, but you probably have. You're in American business. And as you know, when you're in litigation, you exchange documents. It's called discovery. And the state sent us the relevant documents to a Medicaid dispute. 100,000 pages of documents. So I called my client and said, you know, not the worst trial lawyer around, may not be the best trial lawyer around, but I do have this commitment. I will never be less prepared than my adversary going into a trial. So I got 100,000 pages of documents here. I'm going to read every one if you want me to try this case. And I sat down and I read every one. It took me a while, but when I was done, I had become fascinated with healthcare and this world in which we live, in which we actually, on a day-to-day basis, have miracles occur, and we have a absolutely dysfunctional and split apart delivery system. So why are you here? So much for me. You're here because, oh, one more word about me. Yeah, having said all the bad things about me, now let me tell you why you ought to stay here despite the weather, or in addition to the weather. And that is, I have the honor to run one of the better health plans in the United States. I certainly think so, but so do Medscape and WebMD. This actually surprised even me to be listed as either one of the top 2 health plans in the Southwest United States, or as I prefer to think of it, the #1 health plan in the Southwest United States. Though, truth be told, that might be in alphabetical order, but I'll take either one of those. Here's why you're here. It's called the Affordable Care Act for a reason, because healthcare is not affordable, and it is getting worse. You all know this as employers. This slide is not telling you anything that's new in terms of you as a business. Every single year, for as long as you have been in business or for the past 15 years, depending on how long you've been in business, have been wincing every time renewal comes around. Is it going to be 10% more? Is it going to be 15% more? Is it going to be 20% more? And it's unsustainable. It's been unsustainable for 15 years. So the concept of looking at the Affordable Care Act, saying how do you get care more affordable, is a good concept. Why was Congress doing it? Congress was doing it because states had been trying to do this. States had looked at it. Massachusetts, very famous example with Romney Care, but Maine and Maryland and Colorado. Let's talk a little bit about Colorado. Back when Governor Owens was governor, Colorado established the Healthcare Reform Commission in Senate Bill 208. Now, this commission was kind of unique because it was passed by a Democratic legislature, signed by a Republican governor, and the commission was appointed half by Republicans and half by Democrats. It was a bipartisan effort. Those were the days. And we all came together, and it was split in all sorts of different ways. You had to have this many consumers and this many doctors and hospitals and health. There was even a health plan, one health plan representative on the commission. And we all came together. We came up with some proposals. By the way, I said, what are we going to call ourselves? I said, there are 2 names not to call ourselves. Number 1, the 208 Commission, because nobody knows what that means. Seriously, who's going to know about Senate Bill 208? And the other is a Blue Ribbon Commission. I come from Mesa County, Colorado. Yeah, Blue Ribbon sounds like you won the county fair for the best blueberry pie or peach pie. Sorry to be disloyal to Western Colorado there. And so let's not call ourselves either of those things. And so we called ourselves the 208 Blue Ribbon Commission for Healthcare, showing the degree of influence that a health plan has on this. But we sat there as a bipartisan group wrestling with issues, and what we came up with was this is really hard to do on a state-by-state basis in the United States. It's got to be a federal solution. That was one of the things we did. But the other thing that we did that was a little different is to say, well, if we're trying to figure out how to make healthcare more affordable, why don't we solve this problem the way every person in this room solves problems? You go to work, you have problems, and when you roll up your sleeves to solve them, the first question you ask is, why is this a problem? How did I get here? What's driving this problem? That's how human beings solve problems. Did you notice in the congressional discussion something was missing? Why is healthcare unaffordable? Well, the 208 Commission looked at it, and there's a reason it's a little complicated as a political discussion, because no one thing is driving the cost of healthcare. I stopped counting at 15. And we could take the rest of the day and talk about these things. I just want to make a couple of points about them, though. Some of the things that drive healthcare are not bad things. For example, technological advances. We save babies born in the intensive care nursery that are born weighing less than a can of Diet Pepsi. We save babies born at 22 weeks, just a little past the 50-yard line in the gestational age. Now, saving these babies cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. But most people, including parents, would say that's a good thing. Aging. My grandparents died at an average age of 75. Not unusual for the World War I generation. My parents and my in-laws died at an average age of 85. Not unusual for the World War II generation. That 10 years is not a low-cost 10 years. It's not like we're adding time at the beginning when people are healthy as can be. We're adding time in the 70s and 80s. And it costs money. Some of the things here, not so good. Yes, despite my background as a lawyer, I will put malpractice up there. Now, be really clear about malpractice. It's not the premium that makes it a cost driver. It is the fact that we live in a medical culture where when doctors are figuring out how to treat patients, they figure out how they ought to treat the patient, and then they figure out what else they have to do so that if things go wrong and they get sued, they will have a defense. The defensive practice of medicine. More serious the thing, oncology, the more defensive medicine they practice, because people will hire lawyers to look at what the doctor did. Now, you can argue about whether health insurance companies or drug companies or surgeons or hospitals or any other component of the health plan gets too much of the pie. I don't know anybody who argues that lawyers ought to be getting any of the pie. All due respect to my former profession. I guess I'm still in the profession now. And some of these things, so some are good, some are not so good, and some of these things are mixed. Pharmaceuticals. I'm 60 years old, I have high cholesterol, I'm on a statin. Keeps me out of the emergency room, it's a good thing. On the other hand, when's the last time you saw a sporting event in which an erectile dysfunction drug was not advertised? You can't. Remember the Super Bowl halftime incident 5 years ago or so with Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson, right? Everybody was shocked because actually human breast was exposed, and the network went crazy and they cut to a commercial. You know the commercial they cut to? Yeah. It used the phrase 4-hour erection. Now, I appreciate parents are concerned about their children seeing a human breast, but frankly, I'd rather have that conversation than trying to explain that particular advertisement. Why is there, by the way, that's not even the worst of these. The purple pill, remember the purple pill? It used to get, at least you know what the blue pill does. The purple pill was advertised just, it'll make you feel better. And the reason all of that advertising occurs is because for every $1 in advertising, there is $4.20 in sales generated. And we all pay for it. The other focus of this, though, that's really relevant is the cost shift. When I was on the 208 Commission, the Blue Ribbon Commission, the Healthcare Reform Commission, we turned to Lewin, who was doing our modeling, and we said, let's start with this. We know there's an impact of cost shifting, the fact that the government won't pay full freight for Medicare and Medicaid. Hospital or a doctor does a $100 procedure, they get paid $80 by Medicare, they get paid $75 by Medicaid, and who makes up the difference? All of you. So we said, can you figure out what that is? And they went in, they studied it, and they came up with what I call the hydraulic slide. Because Medicare underpays, Medicaid underpays, the uninsured can't afford the treatment in the emergency room, and so the hospital has to make it up by charging you more. How much more? 30% more. You just get Medicare to pay full freight, Medicaid to pay full freight, cover the uninsured, and your rates go down 30% tomorrow. So there are some things to look at in the Affordable Care Act. Is it going to get better? Not right away. I mentioned my grandparents and my parents. I'm a baby boomer. Every day, 10,000 Americans age into Medicare, and that cost shift gets exacerbated. Wow, maybe the long-term side is better? Not really. Percentage of Medicare or percentage of GNP going for Medicare, this is becoming increasingly unsustainable. Who is paying for it? Taxpayers are, and you are in your insurance rates. Maybe there's a need to look at how to make care more affordable. Medicaid, is it any better? Nope, worse. This is the growth rate in Medicaid over the past 4 years. So you have these, in this hydraulic slide, you have more pressure on Medicare and Medicaid, which means rates are going up if you don't change anything else. Well, you better look at that third component, the uninsured, and that's what the Affordable Care Act started out to do. It says, let's get people covered. The people who are uninsured, let's at least look at that. Good idea. How are they going to do it in the Affordable Care Act? Are you going to give people actual access? Colorado has 800,000 uninsured, ballpark. We're going to take 300,000 and not change them. They're still going to be uninsured. They're, because of their immigration status, because they're just not going to show up. Let's be realistic. You're not going to pass a law and cover everybody. 200,000 are going to go into Medicaid. That may not solve that affordable care problem unless you change Medicaid. And 300,000 are going to get covered through premium subsidies in the exchange, which takes us to the exchange. Here is a timeline of the things that are in the Affordable Care Act. I love this. I hadn't seen this before. I actually have, when I first passed, because I'm a lawyer and I'm weird, I printed it out. Okay, truth be told, my admin assistant printed it out. It takes up 7 binders. And I sat and read it one time because it's a couple thousand pages long, as pointed out. Has all sorts of things in there. And we're not going to delve into a lot of the detail of all of it, but let's talk about the exchanges. Now, this became so political so quickly, and there's blame on both sides for that, I might add. But the fact is, has been very partisan with, it's a bad idea. What's a bad idea? Getting care more affordable is not a bad idea. Getting people covered is not a bad idea. If you have issues with how it was done, let's talk about that. But in the world of simplicity, people want sound bites. One of we live in a political culture, and that's just sort of the way it is. This is not a sound bite. So the exchanges are coming along. The exchanges, for all of you who held up your hand the second time, over 50, you're not directly, emphasize directly, impacted by the exchanges. The exchanges affect small employers, 50 or fewer employees, and they affect individuals. But because the way you're dealing with care as a large employer actually deals with individuals, you are affected by this. Let me tell you how significant the individual exchange is going to be. You can go to the individual exchange and you can buy a health insurance product, and if you are below 4 times the federal poverty level, you will receive a subsidy. That line has been out there since this law passed in 2010. 4 times the federal poverty level sounds like you're poor until you stop and think about it. 4 times the federal poverty level for a family of 4 is $88,000 a year. Now, I don't know about your businesses. Maybe you run a really lucrative law firm for all I know. But I'll speak for my business. Most of the employees would be eligible for a subsidy. So even if you're a large employer, you can realize this is something that I need to pay attention to. Because now, for the first time, we have a different equation in terms of providing coverage for people. Do I provide it as an employer, or do I send my employees to the individual exchange? But if you're a large employer, I'm not going to get into the second part of and the third part of the presentation, but suffice it to say that there are penalties that you could bump into depending on the decisions you make. But it's a significant factor. Now, small employers don't have the same penalties, and they actually have some tax credits that you may emphasize, this is not legal advice, by the way, be eligible for. That also is going to be coming in the presentation. The point of this is this will not be an easy thing. This is not going to be something you can just go on the website and figure out here's what I ought to do. It's going to depend upon your size. It's going to depend upon how many part-time employees you have. It's going to depend upon whether you plan to grow or whether you plan to be static. It's going to depend upon how many employees you have that are working 30 hours or 32 hours or 28 hours a week. It is really complex, and it's going to depend upon how much your employees earn as a family, not a factor you've been looking at in the past. It's starting to swirl. The exchange concept is this, that the exchange board wants to simplify the health purchasing decision. This is something that was recommended by Colorado's commission. But there's a price you pay for this. Now, consumer advocates came in and said, it is so confusing. You have so many products out there. Why don't we simplify it? Come up with 4 products, which I, as the health plan representative on the commission, said, you know, you can do that, but understand that the reason those products are out there is because people want them. Somebody wants it. If not, they wouldn't buy it. And if somebody wants it, I want to provide it. So how do you give employers and individuals choice and at the same time simplify this? It's the exchange. There will be different products. There will be essential health benefits. The plans will be standardized in terms of their actuarial value so that the benefit structure has certain minimums, but the benefit plan, the specifics of it, can vary. You can buy a plan with more pharmacy than others, or a broader network, or lower copays. But the actuarial value will be something that you, as an employer, or as a consumer, can go and compare apples to apples to apples to apples and shop in that way. The premium and cost sharing assistance that's going to be available to individuals is going to be significant. That's not available in the small employer exchange. So if you're a small employer, why would you look at the exchange? This is a more complicated question than you might think, but let me just give you a highlight, one highlight. Then I won't trump on you guys. Right now, as you know, you make an option or maybe 2 options available to your employers as a small employer. Hopefully it's rocky, but if not, I can be tolerant this year. That's going to change. You will have the choice as an employer to go to the exchange to say, I'm going to provide a silver level actuarial value plan, and each employee will be able to choose which plan he or she takes. So families actually get to coordinate their care, because not all families work for the same employer. So they can all go to Kaiser if they want, or they can all go to Rocky if they want. They can all go to United, or they can mix and match. One can go to Kaiser, one can go to United, one can go to Rocky, one can go to Anthem. I don't mean to exclude anybody here. So a fundamental shift in how that's going to work for you and for your employees. It will standardize plan coverage, and it will have certain things that are required, such as drug coverage. So even if you don't want to provide it, that has to be something that's in the exchange venue. You'll rate them by 4 categories: bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and a catastrophic plan for people who are under 30. An interesting note on the catastrophic plan. I have 3 kids. They're all around 30 years old, 28, 30, 32. They're all healthy. My daughter, just a 30-year-old, wow, I probably shouldn't have outed that, just got married, hopes to have a family. She's not looking for the catastrophic plan. But my 28-year-old son, healthy as a horse, basically needs insurance coverage in case he skis into a tree or skids through a stop sign. He would be looking for a catastrophic plan. Its catastrophic plan is cheaper, way cheaper than any of these others. Available only if you're less than 30 years old, which I think they pick the age because when you're less than 30 years old, you pretty much think you're invincible, so you don't need anything. But here's the other thing they did. Those subsidies that are available for the people who don't make a lot of money, or however you want to define up to $88,000 a year for a family of 4, those subsidies are not available for the catastrophic plan. Yeah, you can question that or not question that, but that's sort of the way it is. So the key is, through this coverage spectrum, to get people covered up to 4 times the federal poverty level, whether through an expansion of Medicaid or the subsidies in the exchange or premium credits for small employers or large employers paying a penalty if they don't provide adequate insurance, to get everybody covered in access. Okay, not a bad theory, but it's step 1. If all you do is cover the 18% of this nation that is not covered right now, and you don't change anything else, costs continue to climb. Coverage is step 1. It's not the end of the game, it's the beginning of the game. You can't come up with a more efficient system till you got everybody in the system, but that's the name of this game. And you as employers have to look at that also, I would submit. You got to take a look at, who are my employees? Are they 50 years old or are they 20 years old? Because it makes a difference in terms of the product that you are going to buy in terms of your long-term savings, your long-term investment in this. And employees need to do the same thing. This is the hard part. In case you haven't noticed, the first step wasn't exactly easy. We wound up in the Supreme Court and we wound up with it being a huge issue in the election. But this is the challenging part. There are people who think this can't be done. Yeah, it sounds great, but just live with coverage until we can all sort of let the dust settle. And I would submit that one of the reasons for the second part of the presentation today is because it not only can be done, it has to be done. If you're going to do the right thing for your families, for your employees, you got to find a way to buy the right product. And the right product looks at, how do you realign incentives? Otherwise, we're just going to be having this, how do we cut Medicaid and Medicare conversation that we've been having. Here's why I know it can be done. Because out in Grand Junction, Colorado, where I hail from, we've done it. We haven't just done it for our health plan. We've done it for the community. Now, health plans are hard to compare because, I don't know if you read the article in Time Magazine a couple of weeks ago on hospital costs. It has a big cover called Bitter Pill, but it talks about the complexity of trying to figure out what things really cost in the commercial world. You don't have that problem in Medicare because the cost is per procedure. So Medicare pays the same thing across the board, every hospital, every doctor. That allows us to compare systems. This started in the Dartmouth Medical School. They published the Dartmouth Atlas about 5 years ago, and they looked at what's the lowest cost, highest quality healthcare system in the United States. And we're a bit shocked to find out, you know, if you're in the Eastern time zone, you don't really think about Colorado, much less about Grand Junction, Colorado. But Grand Junction came up significantly. Compare it to really high places like McAllen, Texas, by the way, or Miami, or Manhattan, and we're a third of the cost. You compare it to the state of Colorado or to the national average, we are significantly below. How do we do that? Because we realigned incentives. We didn't just look at cuts. The Dartmouth Atlas was about 250 pages long, which is a little hard to persuade anybody with. So I asked an actuary to read it, write a summary of a couple, 3 pages. He wrote a 3-page summary. It was very good, but he put this chart at the end, so I threw away his summary and just used the chart because picture is worth 1,000 words. How do we get all of the green bubbles down to where the blue bubble is? Here's how. There are things that when you are looking at products, you might consider being focused on. There are things that we as a community out in Grand Junction have been focused on for many, many years. They are not hard to do. You know, the fact of the matter is that better quality health care actually doesn't cost more, costs less. I'll give you an example. Out in Grand Junction, about 15 years ago, we established a program called B for Babies. It's like a multiple pun. B for babies, before babies. It's a prenatal program. Simple mission. Every woman in the community who's pregnant gets prenatal care. Period. Don't care if they're a Rocky member. Don't care if they're my competitor. Don't care if they're uninsured. Don't care if they're on Medicaid. Don't care if they're going to the Marillac Clinic for the uninsured. Don't care if they were born in Grand Junction. Don't care if they came here last week. If you're pregnant, you get prenatal care, period. Funny thing happened after we instituted that program. My wife is a nurse. She is a neonatal nurse practitioner. She is skilled at putting tubes in premature babies, those 24-week babies that we were talking about. Don't ask me how she does it. The St. Mary's, the Regional Medical Center in Grand Junction, has a NICU, has a neonatal intensive care unit for those little babies. And the NICU, which costs about $500,000 a kid, the NICU has the lowest rates in the state. Why? Because more women in prenatal care means fewer premature babies. Fewer premature babies, fewer beds in the NICU. Fewer beds in the NICU, less cost to everybody. Better care, better for the kid, better for the mom, better for everybody in the community. Cost less, because it costs a lot less to do a prenatal visit. Those things get replicated all over the place. And so the Affordable Care Act, you can rail about it, but you can also embrace the parts of it that actually help. Are there parts in this 2,000 pages that actually help? When Colorado decided to create its own state-based exchange 2 years ago, because I am a Republican who believes in health care reform, they asked me to come and testify. And I did. And after the testimony, the Republicans asked me if I would go and speak to their caucus. Just Republicans, very informal over a sandwich. Sure. So we're talking about things like this. And this was at a time when things were really controversial, right? There's like Obamacare was horrible. And one of the Republicans said, you know, it sounds to me like you're in favor of Obamacare. And I said, well, I have a little trouble with the question. And here's why. Let me explain. The Affordable Care Act is several thousand pages long. Even Congress, if you give it 2,000 pages of prose, can stumble upon a good idea. For example, there's a part of this that says, when a person's leaving a hospital, why don't we pay a nurse to call them up 24 to 48 hours after their discharge and make sure they understood their discharge instructions? This has been on the ground in some places in this country. And there's a reason for it. Because I don't know how many of you, I'm not going to ask, probably a HIPAA violation if I did, how many of you have gone to the hospital? I have. And I will tell you that when you're leaving the hospital, you are not at the top of your game. And the doctor meets with you and gives you discharge instructions. Now, let's take somebody who's 62 years old and they're leaving the hospital, not at the top of their game, and they get their discharge instructions. And what do you realize when you do the follow-up phone call 24 to 48 hours later? You realize that, wow, the doctor talked to me? I didn't know that. Or, yeah, I remember the doctor saying something, but I really can't remember what. Or, yeah, I knew the doctor talked to me and he gave me a prescription, but I haven't been able to get to the drugstore yet. Or, yeah, I knew I got a prescription and I did get to the drugstore, I've got it filled, but I don't know if I'm supposed to take it in addition to the pharmacy, the prescriptions I was taking before I went to the hospital, or instead of one of them. And so a 15-minute phone call with a nurse can reduce unnecessary readmissions. How do we know that? Because the place in the country where that was on the ground was Grand Junction, Colorado. It's been on the ground for 20 years. We have a nurse, with certain cases, follow up with a phone call 24 to 48 hours. We didn't do it because we thought, wow, here's a brilliant healthcare reform idea. We did it because it kind of made sense. And after a few phone calls, we knew it made sense because we were finding out people didn't know how they should take their drug, or they hadn't been able to get to the drugstore, or all of these other things. And guess where the lowest readmission rates in the state of Colorado occur? They occur out in our core area. So how do you build a health plan that looks at that? By the way, when I told that story, probably in a little shorter form, to the caucus, everybody said, wow, that's really interesting. And I said, yeah, and what's interesting about it and why I have problems with your question and the way it was phrased is, I don't like to think of that particular program as Obamacare, because I don't think he should get credit for it. I think I should get credit for it because Rocky is the one who came up with it. But I'm happy to cede it to Congress. And in fact, I will commend Senator Bennett, because it's because of Senator Bennett that it got in here. Since it's working in Grand Junction, why don't we take the things there and put them in place in other places in this country? So you can look at all of these things, and at the end of the day, it's about how do you focus on the patient? And here's your challenge as employees, as employers, because your employees all need different things. One of the great challenges of realigning this payment system here is this. 50% of the people accessing the healthcare system incur less than 2% of the cost. And 10% incur more than 70% of the cost. So if all you do is look at access, you're treating the 50% the same way as the 10%. If you really want to make care affordable, you focus on that 10%. Now, as an employer, that has all sorts of complications, which is what we have experts to talk about. But the fundamental concept of a one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare, not a good idea. When I go and I talk to places, Harvard, about what we do in Western Colorado, I say, I'm not here to tell you that you ought to do what we do in Western Colorado. I'm here to tell you that you need to look at what you can affect and how do you create a more effective system around the patient, wherever the patient is. The patient's my 28-year-old son. How do you make a product that's affordable? Because, you know, those coverage assumptions might be a little challenging. You say, well, there's an individual mandate. Everybody has to come to the exchange. Yeah, there is an individual mandate. And let's talk a shade about that. The individual mandate is enforceable through a penalty. The penalty begins at a fine of $95 a year if you file a tax return and if you have a refund coming. Now, call me cynical because I am a lawyer, but that might not be quite adequate to get the attention of, it'll get my 28-year-old son's attention, but his 28-year-old peer, well, they may come to a different analysis, especially because part and parcel of the individual mandate is guaranteed issue. We are changing the individual market phenomenally in a way that's gotten very little discussion. We are changing this market right now. In order to be there, you have to pass underwriting. I could not get individual insurance. Not even Rocky would write me a policy, right? 60 years old, I got high cholesterol, I need to lose some weight. Not going to get a policy. Okay, next year, I get a policy. Next year, everybody goes in. Everybody is guaranteed insurance. So now go back to the 28-year-old decision, 28-year-old's decision, right? Should I buy insurance when I really don't need it, when there's guarantee issue available to me? If I do need it, if I do ski into a tree, I'm going to show up in the emergency room, and they're going to treat me just like they always have. That's going to go back to that hydraulic slide. And the next open enrollment period that rolls around, I can join Rocky. Wow, that actually has kind of have some unintended consequences there. Okay, But now we are going to exacerbate that because we're also going to take the high-risk pools and put them in the uninsured pool. I mean, in the exchange. And we're going to take the uninsured and we're going to put them in the exchange with whatever acuity they have. And then we're going to take all of this in a product that right now is rated. We determine the rates based on, in the individual market, the health status of the individual. And we're going to say we're going to community rate them. All of those things have upward pressure. So how do you get people in the pool? That's a political challenge. You can't solve that for your employees. You have other challenges to solve for your employees, but we may not have solved this problem yet. My last argument for why you as employers should do more than just say, may I just pay the penalty and move on, why you should take a more aggressive approach at this, is we do lots of things out in Western Colorado to create those rates, those savings that we were talking about. But one of my favorite examples is hospice. This is a chart of the amount we spend on hospice in Western Colorado, in Grand Junction. And as you will see from the chart, we're a little north of above average. We spend more on hospice than most places do. Why do we spend more? Because those are the overall costs that we get. By spending a dime today, you can save $1 tomorrow. Now, unfortunately, when I said that to policymakers, they took it literally. No, you really actually can't save it tomorrow. It'll take 3 to 5 years. But by engaging as employers in more than just, I'm going to look at my balance sheet tomorrow, I'm going to look at what the best thing to do for my employees is down the road, you will actually have the best job of lowering your health care cost, which I know is a problem. So I thank you very much for your attention to this. I hope I've given you a couple of things to think about. We are now going to turn to the pros from Dover to have them talk about some of the things that you can do and need to pay attention to with this. Appreciate it.